I know everyone's just finished eating. You've had the keynote speaker come before me. Lucky me to be talking to you now, right? I'm glad to be here. My name is James Ravenell, Senior Solutions Architect at Semperis. Our company is an Active Directory security company. And most of the customers that I'm speaking to on a regular basis, they're coming to us because for two main reasons. They're not always aware of their security posture, and they want to know what to do in the case that they lose access to their Active Directory. So I just want to ask before I really get into this conversation, because I know Active Directory is really cool for me, but just raise your hand if you know what Active Directory is. Ah, my people. Okay, let's get this started here. You see, he had to help me with this. Okay, am I good here now? All right. So, I went ahead. Let's get back to here. So the discussion today is about security and recovery for AD and the questions that need answers. And you might be saying to yourself, well, what the heck does that mean? Like, why are we really talking about AD security and recovery? The first thing is your identity systems. They are the top targets for threat actors today. Sometimes we say when we're at work that threat actors don't hack you anymore. They just log on, right? You have all of these phishing. I mean, raise your hand if you, on your phone, have gotten a text today trying to phish some point of, right? We get this stuff all day, right? And why are they doing that? Because they know that it works. And so they keep doing it. So your organization's identity will be attacked. I don't care who you work for. At some point, your company is under threat of attack. It doesn't mean they're going to succeed. I'm sure you all have, if you're in some form of IT here, and I know that you are because you said you know Active Directory, then you know that there are tools that you have already in place that will help you with your security, whether they be EDRs, XDRs, some type of network security, right? There's always something that you have in place, but still, these threats prevail. In the event that your Active Directory has been compromised and you lose access, speed is the essence. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I want you to think about this. If your company is offline because no one can log into anything, what are your applications that are still going to work? Do you have any? They all require some login. You probably are using some form of SSO to get to a lot of your applications. And so you're going to need to make certain that your underlying identity store in most companies, about 90 to 95% of companies, they're using Active Directory for that. Trust, and I'm going to talk about this a lot. I may not say those words, I may not say the word trust, but this recovering your AD is always about trust. If you have been breached, one of the things that you may or may not know is how long the threat actor has been in your Active Directory. Was it a day? Was it yesterday? Was it last week that they breached you? The average, what we call dwell time, that's how long a threat actor stays in your environment before they drop the payload. I've heard as little as 40 days and as much as 200 days. How long do you keep your backups? Most of us, at the most, we may keep a backup for 6 months thinking, yay, I've got 6 months worth of backup. Keep in mind, we're talking about Active Directory. And depending on the size of your company, a backup of 2 weeks may not be a valid backup to restore from in Active Directory. Hybrid environments make recovery even more interesting. Why? I'm going to show you in a minute what the landscape looks like now. Let me see if this little clicker works. Yay. So again, before we get into this, part of the reason why we're talking about this, the Five Eyes intelligence agencies. Anybody familiar with Five Eyes? Have you seen that before? Right? So a lot of cybersecurity folks, they're familiar with Five Eyes. And I always get the companies mixed up, but it's Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Canada, and the US. and they share intelligence information about what's happening. Look what they said in their report. It said that Active Directory's pivotal role in authentication and authorization makes it a valuable target for malicious actors. It is routinely targeted as part of malicious activity on enterprise IT networks due to its permissive default settings, its complex relationships and permissions. If you have recently deployed Windows to a server, like Windows Server, or deploy Active Directory, one of the things that you're going to find if you've been working with AD a long time, Stephen, you said you've been in IT since 2008. Have you done any implementations of Active Directory or any upgrades in the last decade or so? You have to ask your people. Why is that important? He's saying he has to ask his people. Because one of the things that happens is these things get deployed, and it almost becomes like a set it and forget it. And you would think after decades of being around, Active Directory is about 25 years old now, you would think that some of the default settings out of the box are more secure because we hear every day about someone being breached. That's just not the case. Can it be AD was all so simple then? I remember 1999 to 2000 when I was in IT as like I don't even know what we called ourselves back then. I think it was like I went from a LAN administrator to like a system administrator, and I worked with this guy named Andy Berkowitz, and Andy spent his days drinking coffee and fiddling at his computer, and I would say, dude, what are you doing? You're just drinking coffee all day. He says, oh, I gotta configure this Active Directory. I said, okay, well, what are we doing? We were getting off of like Banyan Vines back then. You're laughing. I see the old dinosaurs in here like myself. I call myself a young dinosaur because I was actually around when AD was being rolled out, coming off of OS2 Warp and Banyan Vines and Novell networks, right? You guys are shaking your heads here. I love it. I don't feel so alone now. But what were we doing, right? We had on-premise applications, right? So we may have had an admin device, security backups, web database. These things were relatively simple. Where are we now? After 25 years, look at the glorious mess we've made. I'm just going to keep clicking, right? Does some of this start to look familiar to you now? You're seeing this complex hybrid environment, right? I remember your identity store was just Windows AD. Now look at it. You have Windows AD talking to the cloud, talking through SSO, giving authorization to your Salesforce, your Zooms, your travel, like your Expensify. Oh, and then it's sending that data over to your HR platforms, and then that is sending stuff to a micro directory that's compiling all of that information into a form that's consistent and shipping it right back into Active Directory. This is a lot of stuff, right? It's just not as simple as as it used to be. And so my question to you is, what happens if you lose your Active Directory? Remember, AD was at the center of all of that. So if you lose your AD, do you feel confident that you could get it back online? And for a lot of people, you may say, well, I have this process and that process. Okay, I can tell you on a daily basis, I'm speaking to people who think they have a plan for AD, and I know that they believe that because when I was on the customer side, I work at Semperis now as a senior solutions architect, a sales engineer. So what our products do is that we help to back up and recover this particular product that we have called Active Directory Force Recovery. It's there to help you back up and recover your AD. And a lot of our customers, when we start talking to them, they realize that, oh, maybe what we have isn't what we think it is. So here are some of the things that I want you to think about. Microsoft has an official manual process for recovering your Active Directory. That process, if you have to print it out, is over 150 pages. You have a book in front of you. How many pages is that in your book there? Less than 150, right? But in the middle of the night, is that something you think you want to be trying to read through? I just know that I don't. In that, there are about 30 steps to this manual process. And the problem is, it's very unforgiving. If you make an error on one of those steps, there is a large chance that you're going to have to start from scratch again. Now, I'm going to be honest, I've never had to do a full forest recovery because of something like a breach, right? And the closest the companies that I've worked for had gotten to that is doing disaster recovery. Raise your hand if you like doing disaster recovery exercises. Have you ever done one? Right? So it is a very challenging process trying to figure out, just doing a DR exercise in general, but then adding to that the complexity of recovering your identity system. And let me say this. You saw that chart earlier where AD was at the center. If your identity store, your primary identity store is inaccessible, you're not going to be able to log into anything unless you have some local break glass accounts that you can get into. There's a large chance that you will be in some trouble. Here's this manual process enumerated. This is a lot of steps. It's a lot of small text you're trying to read. 3 in the morning, you don't want to have to be figuring this out. You see these little clocks that I have? I don't know if this has a laser pointer, so just look at those little clocks, those little circles. Those are clocks. Those particular tasks are very time-consuming tasks. That means that during the process, you may be clicking and waiting, or in some cases, like number 5, where it says that you have to remediate any malware. Oh, did you guys know that if you call Microsoft and say, hey, I've been breached, do you know they're going to tell you, yeah, about that. Do you have a backup? Yeah, we don't do the, you can recover it, but we don't do anything about remediating the threat. You should have did that already. Didn't you get a tool? And you're scratching your head saying, well, you're Microsoft. Like, don't you know how to help me fix that? But I will tell you that Microsoft will tell you, even they use third-party tools for things that they don't develop in-house. And have you read, if any of you use Entra tenants, for instance, right? If you read the SLA on that, you will see in there that they talk about what? Your shared responsibility. They will not take care of your data. They won't cover things like your administrative units or your namespaces, your caps. They don't take care of that stuff for you. That's your responsibility. The problem with this process is that, and some important considerations is that the manual recovery, as I mentioned, is very error prone. Number 8 on this list drives me crazy. This is the metadata cleanup. If you are recovering one of your domain controllers from a backup, however you did it, and only that machine is available, one of the problems that you're going to run into is that it's looking for its replication partners. And if it can't find it, it just starts throwing errors, and it gets ugly, and it gets uglier. And then before you know it, you have a domain controller that's not able to authenticate with any clients or users because it's just like, hey, I don't know what to do. I quit. So that's one of the big things. And also, you have to ask yourself, if you have all of your infrastructure in one site, great. You may not need any additional support. But most of our companies, depending on your scale, are going to have your infrastructure dispersed, multiple sites, data centers that are across the country, and you're going to need to have people to help you to do that recovery. So this process is particularly daunting. And number 3, if you had a backup, that's, depending on what you're using, you most probably have a bare metal or system state backup. And in that case, those backups are only going to help you get to step number 3. That's a lot of work to be doing manually after that. So before commencing an AD recovery, here are some of the considerations. Again, I just want to preface this as saying that there are many ways that you may need to, many reasons rather, that you may need to do an Active Directory forest level recovery. Usually, people are doing it because they've been breached. And some malware has infected all of the domain controllers, or the threat actor has gotten in and kicked all the admins out. Now, those admins might be like, oh, well, no work for me tonight. I can't log in, so I'm just going to chill tonight. But I don't think the C-suite of your company or your president is going to enjoy that so much. So here's some things that I want you to consider. How will you and your team contact each other to coordinate? I'm going to give you a real-world example. I was doing a disaster recovery exercise about 2 or 3 years ago. And we used this system called Confluence that had our entire entire disaster recovery plan built into it. So we would go through step by step, you mark it off, right? And they're like, okay, great. They got to the AD team because we're tier 0. So they made sure all the other teams shut everything down. And then when they got to directory services, they said, all right, turn off your Active Directory domain controllers. And I said, okay, great. All right, it's down. 5 seconds later, hey, I can't use Confluence. Can you use Confluence? I want to mark this thing complete. And everybody's like, oh man, my Confluence. We have 180 people on this call across the company, globally, for one data center. And no one could figure out what happened. Well, I'll tell you what happened. The server that I shut down because they told me it was my turn ended up being the domain controllers that Confluence was hard-coded to use. So you can imagine if it's hard-coded and you turn it off and there's no configuration in it that says search DNS for the remaining company infrastructure, that it's going to fail. And it did. And what happened? We lost our ability to complete that process. We failed the disaster recovery exercise because we could no longer do the updates that we needed to do. In the event where you might have been breached, where is your plan? Is it on something that requires Active Directory? Here's another thing. If you have been breached, especially, are there any regulatory reporting requirements that you must follow? Any healthcare people in here? Any banks, credit unions? I don't know so much about the credit unions, but definitely banks, any government in here, schools. There are usually some regulatory that you have to follow. And also, a lot of them are, I think some just came out last year. I just don't know if this administration is enforcing them, but just be aware that you may have a requirement. Do you need to contact your cybersecurity insurer? Nowadays, that's becoming very important, where the insurer is saying, hey, if you don't let us know right away when you've had an incident, well, we're not going to cover that claim for you, right? And that kind of gets scary because these are all things that you have to just consider before you can even start doing a recovery. Are you required to do any forensics before you commence a recovery? This is a huge thing. If in the way that you are trying to recover, that you have to do this manually, and you're doing a recovery of a backup, I think if I say the term hardware abstraction layer, does that ring a bell to anybody here? That means that you will likely have to use the same hardware that you just got breached on. And if you have to maintain that, well, do you have another one, just a bunch of servers just hanging around that you can start a new recovery? Or do you have to go back to that original equipment? If you're required to do that forensics before you can start, that's time. Back on that chart, okay, so they gave me the key that I got 10 minutes, so I'm going to go through this really quickly, okay? But you have a lot of steps and a lot of considerations that you have to make. Do you have access to your recovery plan? That's huge. We talked about that. Do you have a secure and isolated, secure slash isolated slash air gap? I say those three because people use different terminology for those. But the reality is, when you're trying to recover, one of the first steps on that Microsoft guide is to tell you to disconnect your existing infrastructure from the network. And if you're doing that, you want to make sure that when you recover, that there's no way that a threat actor can get in before you start doing your recovery. But then let's say, you have all of these things done and you've made all these considerations. After you recover, now what? Are you sure that you can trust the recovery that you've made? Are you certain that the threat actors have been mitigated inside of your environment? Remember, they can dwell in your environment, I said as little as like 40 days I've seen on average, up to 200 days. How do you know that the backups that you just recovered are free of threat actors and any ransom or malware? So some of the questions you should be asking yourself for AD recovery. I'm going to say this again. Have you read the Microsoft Forest Recovery document? I'm going to say it again. No, actually, I forgot to delete that one. Let's see what we got here. Do you understand that procedure, even if you have read it? Have you customized that procedure for your own environment? Because I promise you, you don't want to have esoteric language when it comes to doing a recovery. It is a very detailed experience. And so you should be aligning that with your specific environment. Have you tried the procedure? And have you done that regularly? I'm going to tell you, in places that I've worked, yeah, the answer is just no, right? Outside of like the very largest companies that I've worked for that are global, and even when we've done that, we have not done it fully. We've done what I said, where we've turned off a couple of domain controllers and tried to see if we could still access our applications. And that's just not really sufficient. Have you ever tried that procedure at 2 a.m. with the CIO asking you questions in one ear and the crisis management bridge yelling at you and why you don't have the answers for their CEO? Like, it's a lot of stuff, right? Do you have multiple backups of your DCs? Do you have a process? This is really important. Do you have a process for scrubbing that malware that probably got you in this trouble? Do you have a process for scrubbing that? Do you have a detailed topology map of your forest? I've never had that, right? I mean, you know your environment, but sometimes we document these things and then we just never update them. Do you know which DCs hold your FSMA roles, your operations master roles, right? Because that's going to be important if you want to authenticate. And if you don't and you recover something, do you know how to seize that role? That's also important. Do you have your DNS? Is it AD integrated? Are you using something like InfoBlocks? You see in the back table, I see someone has got the InfoBlocks bag. That's use that for DNS as well. Do you have the IP addresses to get to your DNS? Because that's how AD knows how to communicate with other devices, right? And so I'm just going to kind of go through these, just saying that there are so many questions, and I'm skipping through these, but you have to make a lot of considerations for doing this. Let's get to this next part. How do you get through this? What is your greatest asset? Your people, your process, and your technology. That's going to be your greatest asset, your people. Everyone plays a role in securing your Active Directory, right? And I think we all know that. But I'm going to say, in particular, the customers that I speak to who have the most success is when they have infrastructure, however you define that. Sometimes they call it architecture. But when you have infrastructure and security in lockstep, you get a lot more done, right? Because if the humans are aligned, the processes are going to likely be aligned. In the process, do the hard thing when testing your AD recovery. Don't rely on just shutting down a couple of domain controllers. You want this to really mimic, as closely as you're able to, real-world scenarios. It will take some time, but I believe with practice, with doing it repeatedly, rinse and repeat, you can get to a point in your AD recovery that people feel confident, they're trained, they understand what is necessary, and then they won't be so frazzled in the middle of the night. if you get breached. So what's in your technology toolbox? Well, do you know what your AD security posture is? When's the last time you did it? You don't have to answer this, I don't want you to get anybody in trouble in here. But I want you to just think about, when's the last time you looked at your Active Directory security posture? There are many tools that will give you different levels of your network security posture. You have XDRs that do that. You have EDRs that kind of give you that. But do you know what it is for AD? 5 minutes? Great. Do you know what it is for AD? You should. Someone should. And it's not something that you want to do on an ad hoc base where, well, I ran it in January, and this is June 5th now, and you haven't checked. Because when you run an ad hoc report, that report is stale as soon as you finish running it. So you want to, you want your tools to also be able to mitigate AD attacks. Tools that can look at indicators of compromise, an attack, and that can stop those actions. You also want something that if a threat actor is making changes that are unwanted to your Active Directory, that it can revert it. There are different processes and different tools that will approach this differently, but have something that you don't have to actively be sitting at a console to make changes. There has to be a better way to recover than the manual process that I showed you. If you've lost access to your entire forest, I promise you, you do not want to use this manual procedure. You should look for tools, and there are tools in the environment. You can come see our table later on. But you should have a way to recover your environment in a very consistent and automated way, right? It's just like if you ran a script. If you make a mistake when you run a script, the one thing that you know is you ran that script. So it made the mistake the same way probably 1,000 times. But then at least you know how to recover from that. But when you're talking about recovering your AD, you want something that can quickly do that for you in a consistent way. And the tool should also allow you to scan that recovered environment. Earlier I said, well, what sense does it make to recover if you have no guarantee that those threats have been mitigated? So you want to look for a tool that can also mitigate those threat actors and make certain that when you say on that crisis management bridge, okay, we're good to go, that you know it, that you trust it, that you believe it. So at Semperis, I'm just going to say to you that we believe in being a force for good. These are two of our free community tools. Purple Night allows you to do an AD assessment, and it scans without requiring admin access to your domain. Forest Druid is your tier 0. And when we say tier 0, we're talking about your identity. And it allows you to look from your tier 0 identity out to look for attack paths to your domain controllers. Try these out. If you have more questions about them, feel free to come talk to us. I made it. Did I make it? Did I still have like a minute left? Yes? No? 90 seconds. Any questions? You can reach me you can follow me on LinkedIn with that, what do you call that code there? But I'm open if you have any questions at the last minute. No? None? Well, thank you all. That's my time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference.